I'm glad to be joined here in studio with former Governor Bill Walker, who recently announced his candidacy for governor, and his running mate Heidi Drygas, who served as Labor Commissioner for 4 years when you were governor. I want to thank you both for being here and doing your first sit-down interview with us here at the Landmine. First, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, GCI, for making videos like this possible. And before we get into it, Governor, I want to ask you, what have you been up to for the last almost 3 years?
Well, in sort of a snapshot of that time, initially I went off to, I was invited to be one of the 6 fellows at Harvard at the Institute of Politics, the Kennedy School. And so I joined 5 other folks across the country. For that semester, we moved to Cambridge and had a nice place, an apartment there, and ate in the dorms. The food at Harvard is way better than when I went to school, and it was a great experience. We just had a great time. So that was sort of the pre-COVID. COVID kind of came in the middle of that, and so we finished up our time at Harvard actually with via Zoom and with the students. But it was just a tremendous experience. So beyond that, I've been what I call a construction therapy program. I'm a carpenter by trade. I'm a journeyman carpenter. I worked in Carpenters Union, Labor's Union, in Teamsters, but to 1281. And so I have a passion for building things. And so I really have buried myself in adding on to my commercial building in Valdez. We put 1,000 square feet onto that. My brother came up and gave me a hand on that. That was fun. So adding onto our house, adding onto our another cabin, a grandkids cabin during the quarantine time. I'm a lumber hoarder, anything over 4 feet.
Well, that's
now 2 feet. Used to be 4 feet. Now 2 feet. I hang on to. I looked at that, and I couldn't go to a hardware store to buy a screw or a nail or lumber for 2 weeks. I looked. I said, I think I got this. I got windows and doors and stuff, and it really cleaned up around the cabin as far as the garage. As far as it's completely empty. We have another cabin just for the grandkids only. And so yeah, I've been
Keeping
busy with that, and it's been good.
I remember in 2010, one of the things you said that struck me the most was we used to build things, now we study things.
Right.
That was one of your kind of lines.
Right. I have not a lot of patience for studying things. I have a passion for building things. And at some point, you got to take that rule of blueprints and go to work. And so that's what I did for the last 3 years.
Heidi, I want to ask you, I know you, I think folks in politics know you were Labor Commissioner for 4 years, but the average Alaskan probably doesn't know much about you or maybe hasn't heard of you. Can you talk a little bit about yourself, your background, and
Sure.
Who's Heidi Drygas?
I should say I did not know that you were a lumber hoarder, and so you and my husband should talk.
We should.
There might be a therapy program for this. I come from
There isn't.
I'm married to a lumber hoarder, so.
Okay.
If it's for sale, he's going to charge.
I know. No, actually, maybe you shouldn't tell him.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I was born and raised in Fairbanks. My family is from there. My parents moved up from California in the 70s. My dad had a swimming scholarship and went up to university. And he left to work on the pipeline. And my dad worked out of Carpenters Local 1281 in Fairbanks and built the pipeline, and then built many of Fairbanks's biggest projects in the 70s and the 80s. And so we were raised there. And I stayed there for college, and I worked in the tourism industry. I worked for John and Judy Binkley at the El Dorado Gold Mine. A lot of my good friends are from those days at the El Dorado. I worked at the Riverboat Discovery.
Ooh, after I've been on that.
It was fun. I loved working there. It was a bunch of my high school friends, and it was a great environment. I loved interacting with folks coming to Alaska. It was a great job to have in high school and in college. And then I went to law school. I had to leave because there's no law school in Alaska, so I went down to Oregon, Willamette University. I got my law degree, and never occurred to me to live anywhere else. So I came back. I worked in Fairbanks for a year. I clerked for a judge, and then I moved to Anchorage, and I had a brief stint as an insurance defense attorney at a law firm in Anchorage, and then I was hired as general counsel for the Alaska District Council of Laborers, and I served in that capacity for 10 years. I loved that job. I loved being a worker advocate. I feel like practicing law was my service to workers. I did that. That was the role that I could play to help workers, protect workers on the job, and enforced our collective bargaining agreements. I loved that work. I thought I would do that for the rest of my life. I would collect my pension and volunteer in my spare time and with my peony farm on the side, which is still my lifelong dream, is to retire and have a peony farm.
That's a big thing in Alaska politics, peony farming. So
Apparently,
that comes up sometimes.
I love Alaska peonies. I could go on and on, but
At any point during that whole period you just described, did you ever think you would be running for lieutenant governor of
never.
Alaska?
No. And so I got a phone call in 2014. I was a huge supporter of Bill Walker in his race for governor in 2014. Worked very hard through the labor's union and through organized labor on that in that effort. And I was just as eager as everyone to find out who was going to be labor commissioner. And so I got a phone call from Bill Walker, and he asked me would I serve in that capacity. And I hate to admit it, but my initial response was no. I was 36 years old. It felt like a big thing to take on. I had this great job that I was comfortable in. I loved the work that I did, and I was really hesitant to step into that role. So I told him no. And
I'm 36 now, and I can't even imagine doing something like that.
I can't imagine you doing that, Jeff. No, I'm just kidding.
Trust me, it wouldn't be good for anybody.
So, but Bill was persistent and gave me a little time to think about it. And I thought about what, I think that's important for young people and women to step into roles. I think it's important to spread your wings. I just hadn't done a lot of that yet. So I ultimately, after some careful consideration, I ultimately decided to join his cabinet, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It led to so many things in my life. That job, serving in your cabinet for 4 years, was the greatest honor of my life, but it also led to me moving to Juneau and meeting my husband, and now I have my beautiful daughter Olive, and there's so many other things that happened because of that decision that I made.
Do you remember how many votes you got for your confirmation? Most people
I sure do. I do.
50s?
59-0, and only because Chris Tuck was he was having a baby, so I wasn't able to.
As a labor person, I'm sure he would have been
I feel confident. Yes. Yeah.
So obviously, Governor Walker, the first question here, the big question is, why are you running for governor again?
I didn't leave office at the end of my term, saying, boy, I've got to get back there. I just sort of took that time that I described before, was pretty much at peace with, what I was doing, enjoying what I was doing. But I also, my love for Alaska exceeds probably much. It's a very strong commitment to the state. And I was born here. This is home. My dad was in the Aleutians in World War II in the Alaskan Scouts. My mother helped build the Alcan Highway. I just have a passion for Alaska. So I watched what was happening, and I looked at what was not happening, and I looked at what we were able to do, reduce the budget by 44%, be able to create opportunities for this state, and yet we're still stuck, and we still had an unbalanced budget. We're still living off of savings. We've gone through $18 billion of savings. I just envision what we could have built with that $18 billion. So I don't think we're on the right path. I think there's so much divisiveness, and that's kind of, we didn't always get along with the legislature, and they didn't get along with us, and for good reason, but you just have to sit down and work it out. That wasn't happening. So I just didn't feel we were going to get through to making Alaska function to its full potential with what we had. So I said, I received a lot of input from people that surprised me, across the aisle input, across the state input, saying, please consider running. So I did. That's when I began that discussion. I think we had a discussion about that time. So
we did a Zoom podcast back in early spring. So late, I guess early spring, late winter.
So that's kind of how I got to it. It was not a snap decision. It was sort of developed over time. And if I think I can add value to Alaska, putting Alaska, rebuilding Alaska, then I'm willing to take the field.
As you know, our new election system, ballot measure 2, there's an open primary and a ranked choice general, but also a result of that is a unique situation we haven't seen in Alaska, I don't think ever, where the lieutenant governor and the governor run as a ticket as a team. Before it was the primaries, or you do petition, you'd kind of get married after, forced marriage after the...
Arranged marriage.
Arranged marriage.
Arranged marriage, it's a better word. Arranged marriage after the primary. So now you can pick your running mate. I want to ask you how you came to choose Heidi Drygas as your running mate.
Well, I love the process we have now, that you can do that. I mean, technically you can sort of do that as an independent, you can do that, but it's a little bit cumbersome and all the signatures, et cetera. You know, I got to know Heidi through her dad. I met her dad, Mark, just a wonderful, wonderful man, before I met Heidi. And so I got to know him. I said, this guy's, you know, I went in for like 10 minutes, and an hour later I was finally, you know, pulled away from the main meeting with him. And so then I got to know Heidi a bit, and I was really drawn. You know, I didn't take no for an answer when I'm used to getting no. I mean, I asked Donna out many times before she finally said yes. So I have that. You know, that doesn't mean anything to me. It just means I just happen to ask in the right way. And so I just continued that. And so, you know, working with Heidi as a commissioner, and what she did with the Commissioner of Labor, and how she interacted in the cabinet, because our cabinet was very, you know, we met regularly, very interactive, very much a team effort, and seeing how she handled that, how she handled working with the legislature. You know, 59-0 confirmation says something about somebody. I wouldn't have gotten anywhere near a 59-0 confirmation as if that was required by the legislature. So it's really her passion. Her passion. We have a shared passion. You know, resumes and credentials are one thing, but passion, that isn't built on the job. You either have it or you don't have it. And Heidi has it absolutely. And so that was really what I was drawn to Heidi about, was that passion she has for, you know, her roots, her vision for Olive, her vision for her beautiful daughter she and Kevin's beautiful daughter that they would love to see grow up and go to UAF the same as Heidi did.
Well, when you started exploring running seriously, I imagine a lot of consultants and politicos had different ideas. Do you go with somebody, you know, conservative or progressive, or they had different? How much was that a factor in the decision, and how much was it getting somebody obviously you've known for a while? You
know, what really impacted me, Jeff, on the selection of Heidi was somebody who I have a lot of respect for. She said, you need to have somebody that you have a working relationship with, that you already know, that it's already there. You're not just picking somebody out of a computer, you know, matrix, a spreadsheet matrix that said, you know, you're here, this person here. And so that's what I thought a lot about. Who have I worked with in the past that I really, and there's been a lot. And somebody from the cabinet is really, you know, in my line of work, you know, we might not have crossed paths, but as a cabinet member. So I really looked at that, and so it was. We don't have to develop a working relationship. We have a working relationship. So on day one, we hit the ground running, and so that's really what Heidi stood out as an obvious pick for me.
I want to ask you, after serving as Labor Commissioner, and then I think there's a year cooling off period, you've been working as a lobbyist for some organized labor unions. Are you going to continue to do that going forward now that you're a candidate, or?
Well, no, yeah, I mean, so primarily I work for building trades unions. So I'm, after we left office, I hung up my shingle, so I have a private practice, and I serve as outside general counsel for several building trades unions. And I did lobby for a couple of building trades unions, but no, I've terminated those contracts. So I'm no longer lobbying, but I am still actively in the practice of law. It is being a worker advocate is a full-time job, as my phone can attest.
Was that like an awkward, hey, I can't be your lobbyist anymore, I can't tell you why, or did you wait till you could kind of tell them why?
No, we would calling it, you know, there were a couple of folks under the tent, and so a couple of my clients were under the tent and aware of this, so it didn't catch them off guard, and they're extremely supportive.
On that same note, Governor Walker, you're a partner in Brennan Bell and Walker now, law firm. Is that something you're going to continue to do while you're running for governor, or
no?
Or,
that I don't think that would be appropriate. So I will step away from that.
This happened before too, weren't you a lawyer last time, and you're running? But that was kind of different because you hadn't been elected.
Right, yeah, exactly. And when I was elected, I sold my law firm and whatnot. So I'll be stepping away.
So full-time campaign now.
Absolutely.
Candidates.
Well, I'm still working. Sorry, touch my microphone. I'm still working, but yeah, it's going to be juggling a couple full-time jobs.
Be a busy year. So kind of with the ballot measure 2 and the open primary and ranked choice general. Last time Mark Begich getting in the race caused some kind of questions. Are you going to run a Democratic primary? Were you going to run as a petition? You eventually ended up running as a petition with signatures with Byron Merlot. Now you're an independent again. How's the rank choice and the open primary changing the dynamic of the race, and would you be running if that wasn't the case?
Well, I think it helps, Jeff. I think the changes that were made by the voters in Proposition 2 is good. I think it's healthy to have it sort of makes it a little more level playing field, if you will, without the closed primaries, et cetera, because you're really not in the primary. So I had a number of people that would say after we didn't see my name in the primary, go, well, what happened to you? Why aren't you in the primary? Oh. Well, so I had to explain that. So I think it'll be better because of that. I just think it's and I'm not an anti-party person at all. I moved from Republican to Independent years ago, and so I just think it's going to be having a choice. I think is a good thing.
How much time? I know at the time before the June 1st deadline, it was just kind of what are we going to do? How are we going to run? How much time did that consume then? And then now you're not having to think about that. So I guess what kind of advantage would that be?
Well, I think it would be an advantage, and I don't I always knew I was running as an independent. I never looked at anything else as other than in 2010 I did. So I think it just allows you to focus more on the issues, who you're going to run with. And I think you end up with you're spending the time where it's appropriate rather than trying to figure out how to maneuver this, maneuver that.
So as you know, the legislature is currently in their third special session, and there's still no long-term fiscal plan. There's this working group, and they've had some ideas, but again, there's still no long-term plan. This was a kind of highlight of your candidacy, and when you were governor, a long-term fiscal plan. You were able to get the percent of market value for the permanent fund passed, but nothing else. You fought with the legislature a lot. Governor Dunleavy's same kind of thing. Why is it's so hard to fix this problem, and what would be your plan going forward if elected?
Well, we fixed 3/4 of the problem when we resolved 3/4 of the deficit. It was a little over $4 billion, and we brought it down to $1 billion. So that was by Senate Bill 26. We got 26 through, which was a very significant shift for Alaska's funding. We took the dependence on oil from about 85% down to 30%. We reducing the budget. We brought the budget balancing at about $80-90 a barrel down to $70 a barrel. So there was a significant amount of work that was done, and the legislature since then has sort of taken that lead and trying to work on the fiscal side. The problem is there doesn't seem to be the relationship or the working together between the governor's office and the legislature. There isn't that leadership. And I remember walking the halls and going into legislators' offices and talking to them about it, doing what I could to build relationships because, it wasn't an us and them. We didn't always agree, but we're all together on this. And so I don't think we see that. We just don't see that. I don't see anybody, when I joined, when I did see eye to eye with Speaker Chenault, and after a couple of rounds in my office, I said, I have a relationship with him, I need a better one. And so they helped me join his bowling team. And so when you bowl with somebody at a couple of beers at the Taku Lounge and Taku Lanes at the lounge, you get to know them a little differently. And we became pretty good friends, and to this day, we're pretty good friends. So you have to sometimes reach outside of your comfort zone and not that he was wrong in anything he was saying or I was wrong. We just didn't see eye to eye, and we learned how to communicate at the bowling lane.
I'll ask both of you this. I've been watching that working group pretty closely, and one of my takeaways was everything that they're saying, that's being said, is kind of eerily reminiscent to what you were saying as governor. And obviously, you got a lot of pushback from the legislature on a lot of your proposals, and whether it be revenues or even the POMV. I guess what are your thoughts about what's being said now compared to what was being said then, and how nothing has really changed except really the POMV?
Well, that's true, and we introduced a lot of legislation, and I think that's what a governor's supposed to do as far as from a leadership standpoint. Maybe we introduced too much. One time we introduced a whole buffet of options. They said there's too many options, so we came back and we introduced single ones, broken up into individual ones, and they said now there's too many options. So maybe the legislature just wasn't ready. Maybe the state, as a state, was not ready. but I think they're ready now. And I think the legislature, I applaud them for the hard work they're doing, trying to do this somewhat on their own. And so I think that's unusual. And so there is a lot of similarity. I mean, there's only so many levers. I mean,
I always say there's three levers. There's permanent fund, there's spending, and there's revenue. That was going back to 2001. There was a fiscal plan working group, or fiscal policy caucus. Same thing. You know, it was you take the dates out and you take the just the dates out. It looks like the exact same thing we're seeing today.
Well, I think the difference, Jeff, is we started in at UAF in Fairbanks. We had 300 people come up there for 3 days, slept in the dorms.
That was the bunk bed thing, right?
Yeah, bunk
I had
beds.
a dorm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you really?
My parents lived there, but I wanted the full experience.
So Bill Corbis out of Juneau had just given $8 million to an organization in Juneau to help grow Juneau. He came to me and he said, Governor, is there any possibility you could pull some strings? Could I get the bottom bunk? I thought, you know, only in Alaska we have, so we just gave him $8 million away, asking about, and I said, you know what, it's yours, you get the bottom bunk. But we listened to them for 3 days. We put different groups, we broke up in different groups. We invited the media, we wanted the media there, we live streamed it, and we took that, and then we went and we had 500 town hall meetings around the state. And it was, you know, Randy Hoff, Commissioner Hoffbeck, you know, Pat Pitney, just, you know, we broke the cabinet up into groups and said, go out and talk to Alaskans and explain this, you know, the situation. So then after that, when we reduced the budget by 44%, Alaskans understood the significance of what it needed to be done. It was not pleasant. Believe me, it was not pleasant on our side or anybody's side. But that's how we started out. We didn't bring in folks from outside of Alaska to sort of do, you know, big budget cuts with a dull axe. You know, it was with a scalpel, was with talking to Alaskans, getting their input, and making sure that we were trying to be as careful as we could. So that's just a different approach.
Well, and I would say too that it's like the issue hasn't changed. I mean, our administration did a lot. We closed the gap by 75%. But the obstacle is still there. We still have a gap to close. But I think when it comes down to it, it wouldn't take that much. It's going to take a little push and pull from here and there, but you can't get to that point without having those relationships. And the problem that I see is that there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of trust, a lack of faith in this administration. And when you don't have that, when you don't work to build those bridges, like the governor was saying, where you reach across the aisle, it's frustrating to see because we get this idea or this divisive rhetoric that everybody's on their own team, they're in their own silos, but people are people. Politics is just one aspect of a person's identity, and I usually find that it's a smaller aspect. So if you have the ability to reach across and find common ground, you learn that you can you're not going to agree on everything. Nobody's ever going to agree on everything. But you can find common ground and figure out where you can bring those ideas together. But it starts with having those relationships and having that trust and building that trust. And once you lose that trust, it's very difficult to get it back.
Governor Walker, you mentioned the budget reductions, and a lot of that came from the operating budget. I think its peak was about $6 billion, and it was down to $4.5 billion, where it's been for a while. But the other big reduction was the capital budget, was upwards of $2 billion, and it was as low as $100 million and change. Both of you guys have labor backgrounds. We've really struggled for years to have any kind of meaningful capital budget. I guess get both of your thoughts on a larger capital budget compared to where we are now.
Well, the capital budget is what really helps Alaska work and puts a lot of Alaskans to work. Plus, we need the infrastructure that comes. So one thing we made sure is that every federal dollar that was out there, every federal dollar could come to Alaska. We did everything we could to get it to Alaska. We did not send any money back to Washington. We applied for grants, which was a bit unusual. That because when you have plenty of money, you don't apply for grants. We applied for a lot of grants. So we need to have a capital budget. I mean, that's just imperative. A healthy one. If you go too big of a capital budget, then we end up with lower 48 companies coming in and doing that work and bringing a lot of their people with them. So you have to be careful about that. I hope we get to that problem, that level that would be a problem. We're a long ways from it now, but so we are very mindful of what needs to be done on a capital budget basis, because, and also deferred maintenance, Jeff. I mean, you don't have ribbon cutting for deferred maintenance, but it needs to be done. And so we looked at that volume of work that needs to be done. And typically, deferred maintenance is done by local contractors in a region. Out in Bethel, when they do, work out there, a lot of local folks in Bethel are going to get those jobs. And so the deferred maintenance is also very critical.
Well, I think we have a $2 billion backlog in deferred maintenance, and the governor's right that it's local contractors that do that work. I mean, having a capital budget is critically important for jobs, and for the economy. It spurs other business. I mean, obviously for construction contractors, but all the ripple effects of those funds. I mean, I think that the infrastructure package, the talks in Washington, D.C. with the tremendous work of Senator Murkowski is fantastic news. We need that. We need that work.
It's kind of like a bailout capital budget for us.
It is, and we talked a lot about this session about having a capital budget, and there was a lot of support for it, a lot of support for a robust capital budget. It's overdue, and the more deferred maintenance that we have, the more expensive it's going to be to maintain these facilities that we have and roads, and we need to modernize our infrastructure. So I think it's critically important.
Governor Walker, I wanted to ask you, in some ways, maybe in many ways, you were kind of defined by the veto of the dividend in 2016, and that's been the issue. We all know that. If you could go back, would you have done the same thing?
I probably would have, and here's why. I hated doing it. I hated that it was necessary to do that. The Republican-led Senate had passed legislation that would have brought it to $1,000. The House, they couldn't get it out of committee to get it on the floor for a vote. We had a special session on that, and they just couldn't. They felt the votes were there, but they just couldn't get it on the floor. So I was faced with a situation: do I leave the Senate? They took action, and the House didn't, so they were kind of out there on their own. And knowing that we had to make some adjustment, there had to be some adjustment, because the permanent fund had become the golden goose. I mean, it's significant golden goose, and we realized that. So since then, every legislature since then has basically done the same thing I did. So it was a tough decision, Jeff, because it disproportionately impacted Alaskans.
So I was going to ask you that. Do you feel you did the first veto, and then, as you said, since then, the legislature every year has appropriated a smaller dividend than the formula, statutory formula. Do you feel at all maybe unfairly targeted in some ways, where it's really in some ways on you, but you did it once, and then ever since in the legislature, do you feel like you kind of took that burden off of them once you made the initial veto?
Well, what I said during the State of the State, I ran for this job to do the job and not keep the job. And if I make decisions that cause me not to keep the job, then that should be okay, because it's not about how do you do things that's going to keep you in office for as long as possible. How do you do the right thing? I really felt that was the right thing to do, and I think that. So I did. I don't think I was unfairly targeted necessarily, because I was the first one to do that. And the first.
I guess I mean since then. It's
since then, I really feel for those that have taken hard positions on that, because it's become significant campaign issues for lots of folks about the size of the dividend. And that's unfortunate. I just think there's more to Alaska. That's an important part. We need to pay the absolute highest dividend possible. That's a fabric of our economy, and very important to families in Alaska to have that. So we need to have the highest level that we can afford without jeopardizing the future dividends. So that's really where I think we come into conflict with some.
If you have a lot of experience with this issue, if you had the magic wand, I mean, there's Governor Dunleavy's suggestion the 50-50. There's been other suggestions. If you had the magic wand, what do you think is the solution, or what should happen to make the problem?
I think we need to look at the formula. We have a formula that was put in place 40 years ago, and times have changed significantly in 40 years. That was when oil was flowing significantly. We've gone as high as 2.1 million barrels a day, down to where we are under 500,000. So I think the formula needs to be looked at to make sure it's modernized, but in such a way that it's sustainable. I think that's what on fish. We don't fish until all the fish are gone. and we don't jeopardize future generations of fish. It's very frustrating for fishermen that opener and enclosures as far as when you can and can't fish. But look at Bristol Bay this year. Yeah, the biggest return they've ever had. So, and there were years that fishing literally was shut down for the whole year. And so that government wasn't very popular at that time either. So we have a history of managing our renewable resources sustainably, and the permanent fund is one. But I think we have so many opportunities in Alaska to add to that, not just grow the fund, but also the opportunities in Alaska as far as employment. And we're down 30,000 jobs now, and just because of COVID and those kinds of things. And another reason that former Commissioner Drygas is going to make a wonderful lieutenant governor. Her passion is jobs. Her passion is creating jobs and making sure Alaskans have these jobs. So it's all related, no question about that. But it's really about the economy.
You mentioned the COVID situation, so I'll ask now. I guess, what are your thoughts about how COVID has affected the state? And I'm curious how you think Governor Dunleavy has handled it over the last several years.
Well, he has had good people in good positions to handle that, and so I think Dr. Zink and her team have done a tremendous job. And I was on a flight the other day to Ketchikan, and she was there. I had the chance to actually thank her for her good work, and so I think there's been a good work in that area. I think I've watched other states. Charlie Baker, Governor Baker in Massachusetts, and Larry Hogan in Maryland, they've done a lot of incentivizing to encourage people to get vaccinated, and other states have done it differently. I'm not going to sit here and say, I think that they did the best they could, and so I'm not going to criticize anybody on the COVID response. It's a very delicate issue. I think there's more could be done on the vaccination encouragement, but certainly not through a mandate. Basically, maybe through an incentivization program.
Have both of you been vaccinated?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as soon as I could be, I was.
Yeah.
I was in the legislative allotment because of my press.
Oh,
pass, so I got that back in March.
So you had a priority preference then?
I guess probably, it's scary as that sounds.
Well, good for you.
I wanted to ask you were Labor Commissioner 4 years, so you were not elected but confirmed. I don't think you've run for office before, right?
This is the first time I've ever run for office.
So I guess I was going to ask, it's been a few days, but what's it like being a candidate, and what do you expect running with Governor Walker? Was before you were he was still your boss, but you were kind of in charge of the Labor Department.
Well, it's only been 2 days now, so I don't have an immense amount of, I haven't been doing it for that long. But, we've been talking about this for many months. We've been meeting on it. We have a running text thread. And, I guess it's different. It's different. I'm glad that I'm no longer in the closet. I'm glad that I can talk to folks and have open conversations. It's been really wonderful hearing the love and support from my friends and family and folks I've worked with. I would say, I think first and foremost, it's been very comfortable. Like it's been fun. We've had a couple late nights the last couple nights, and it's been fun. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to do this. I don't necessarily think I had some independent idea on my own that someday I wanted to be lieutenant governor. But I would love to serve with Bill Walker. I love the kind of leader that he is. And I really enjoyed working for him and with him. Bill empowers the people around him. He finds good people and puts them to work and trusts them to do their job. And we worked together so well in the cabinet. It was really a wonderful experience. So running for elected office is different. So I have a lot to learn. I'm still learning, doing, media and social media. I sent out a tweet last night, and I didn't even know how to do a tweet thread. I'll have to work on that. I did 2 separate tweets. So
you're gonna end up in the Alaska Stalker pretty soon.
I know. At some point, I probably will. But anyway, it's so far it's been good. I know it's going to be difficult. I know it will be challenging for me and for my family. But I just, just like the governor said, I believe in this state. I am passionate about Alaska. Alaska has been so good to me and so good to my family. I have had opportunities here that I never would have had anywhere else. You know, I was just a kid from Fairbanks who grew up in a working class household that, you know, to be sitting here is incredible to me. And I just don't know if that's possible in many other places. And I want that for my daughter. I want that for my daughter. I want her to have those opportunities. And right now, I'm really worried about whether she will, unless we have a course correction and we do it quickly. I don't know if my daughter and your grandchildren are going to want to stay in this state. And so that's why I decided to do this.
Well, unfortunately, in the last several years, we've seen an out-migration
Yeah.
in Alaska, and we see that in some of the census data. So I think that's a concern for a lot of people with younger people or people with young, families and kids. Governor Walker, I wanted to ask you, when you hear the name Bill Walker, a lot of times gas line. I think what's your license plate? Is it AKLNG?
AKLNG, good memory.
Yeah.
Good memory, yeah.
So, you pursued the gas line heavily when you were governor. You had the deal with China that didn't really pan out, but some folks felt it was close. Since then, I think you've been involved in some conversations or attempts, but I mean, it seems like the market really isn't there to build it. Is this something you're going to continue to pursue as a candidate, and if elected as governor?
That was one of the biggest disappointments I saw. Was what we left was 15 non-binding letters of agreement with the market from Japan and Korea, Vietnam and China. And so combined, it was phenomenal volume and a lot of interest. And the incoming, we had an election, incoming governor Dunleavy he didn't like the project, is what he said. And so all those they expired. And I got calls from the market afterwards from Japan saying, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" We were and I said, "Well, every governor gets to handle it however they want to handle it." So that went away. So I can't sit here and say, yes, I have been involved in the gas line. And the reason I was is because I saw what the oil line did for Alaska. For me, just pounding nails on the pipeline to, becoming the governor of the state. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do that if it hadn't been for, the work I had at that time. So we saw that evaporate. And I don't know that the state should have a role in the gas line any further, because a single election can do what we just saw happen, and so without the market, there is no project. There's no question. We got to have gas, got to market. So it's not something I'm putting out there to run on that issue now, because I don't know we can get that back again. And I see it differently. I see it should be a private sector project. I think we may have some assistance on the market side, perhaps, but nothing that I'm going to run as a main theme of my campaign. Would it change Alaska significantly? Of course it would. But we have to look at it differently, and again, I don't know if we can get back to where we were. We were very close, like you said.
I wanted to ask kind of a historical perspective. Since statehood, only one governor has been elected to separate terms, Wally Hickel, who was a mentor of yours. Very different circumstances. He left halfway into the term to become Interior Secretary under Nixon, but he was elected, it was 20 years later. But as a mentor of yours and somebody, I think he gave you the advice to run as an independent back in 2010, right?
He did. He was my co-chair of my campaign.
So I guess, have you thought about that kind of parallel at all?
No, I haven't. In fact, I just saw his son Joe on the trail the other day, on the coastal trail, and chat with him a little bit about his dad. And I do think about that, because I did travel with him, with Governor Hickel, and his vision, and his passion, for what more we could be doing. Based upon our resources and our location in the world, his passion was contagious. And I just love spending time around Governor Hickel. And so that's part of what drives me as well, is that we just don't have that passionate drive for growing the state, and again, as we see population leave and kids leaving for school and not coming back. So I'm very much a product, very much a student of Governor Hickel. There's no question about it. It was an honor of my life to spend time with him, and with and First Lady Emily Hickel as well. She was a force in her own right. So.
Last question. I'll start with you, Heidi. I'm going to ask you both the same question. What's your at this point message to Alaskans on your candidacy and your campaign?
I think it's time to rebuild Alaska. I mean, we need to rebuild trust, restore faith. We need to focus on our infrastructure. We need jobs. We need job creation. We want to bring in business and new industries to Alaska. You know, I'm really excited about Alaska's future. We've got to get over this fiscal issue. I mean, we've got to get our economy back in shape. And I know that we can do it. I know that there are, through, you know, those relationships and building trust, finding common ground where you can find it. I know that we can do that. We're going to have a difficult time tackling anything if we cannot tackle Alaska's fiscal issues. And I think we can do that. So I just think it's time to rebuild Alaska. It's time for a course correction.
Governor Walker, same
You know, I think it's time that we focus on what we have, not what we don't have. I mean, we are an incredible state. We have the 18th largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, the largest in the U.S. by magnitudes. You know, we have the natural resources. If we were a country rather than a state, we'd be the 8th richest natural resource rich country in the world. We have location. You know, we have. So there's so many positives that we have. I mean, the coastline, the ocean, the blue economy. We have so many incredibly wonderful opportunities that need to be responsibly developed, and we're focusing on what we don't have. We need to fix what we don't have, and we need to fix it on a balanced basis. We need to fix it. Everybody has to put a little something in the offering plate when it goes down the aisle. We can't just pull one lever really hard and say, it's your turn. We have to be careful in what we do when we resolve the fiscal situation so that we aren't hurting Alaskans. We aren't disproportionately putting the burden on one group or the other group. And so it just has to be balanced, has to be careful. We need to give stability for businesses to know that they can invest $1 billion in Alaska and they know what the tax structure is going to be. And so I think we're focusing on the negative and not the opportunities. And that's really what this is about. And I have, as governor, I saw the opportunities. When you sit down with you know, the President Moon of Korea and talk about Alaska, he gets very excited about the opportunities. You know, Prime Minister Suga, now Prime Minister Abe, then we gave a presentation about Alaska. He was very excited about that. We need to recognize, you know, we're a huge cargo hub. Let's put passengers on those planes as well. We used to have convoys here in Alaska that would carry cargo and passengers. Let's bring passengers, you know, and visitors to Alaska, winter and summer. I mean, I just think we have not come close to realizing the opportunity we have in all sectors. And so it's really about the opportunity of Alaska that's causing me to do this, because I've seen that. Yes, I've dealt with the tough stuff. Boy, have I dealt with the tough stuff. And that was not pleasant. And I said at that time, I hope no other governor has to do the decisions I've made to solve 3/4 of the problem. We'll solve the last 25% by working with Alaskans and bringing them to the table, sitting down with legislators, helping them, working collaboratively, and let's get on with our future. That's really what brings us to this decision.
Well, I really want to thank both of you again for sitting down with me for your first kind of long form interview. It's a different situation now that there's tickets instead of these what we call it, arranged marriages. So again, I want to thank you both for sitting down with me, and I'm sure you have a busy month and year ahead. So again,
and Jeff, thank you very much. And one of my goals is not become one of the loose units that you referred to.
I think you might have been before.
I may already have.
I do feel like we need 2 ferns here.
We have some plans, and another live stream we did. Someone kind of commented, it looks like between two ferns.
So yeah,
that's
totally. When I sat down, that is the first thing I thought.
I'm not sure if he's seen it. Have you seen that?
No.
I'll tell you about it afterwards. Okay. It's a little comedy video show. Zach Galifianakis. So.
Oh, it's
good.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank both of you for coming here.
Thanks,
and,
Jeff.
And talking to me. And I'm sure you have a busy, upcoming several months and next year ahead. So we'll be talking to you again.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank our main sponsor, GCI, for making videos like this possible. And we look forward to doing more of these videos with candidates, and everyone who's running for governor and other races are invited to come in here and talk to us and be interviewed. So we look forward to doing more of these throughout the next year and the campaign season. So thanks again, and stay tuned for more interviews.